Welcome to Hilary Topper on Air, the podcast you can't afford to miss.
Planning financially for you and your family can feel daunting, but it doesn't need to be. A living trust can help you put your mind at ease and be an invaluable planning tool. But do you really need one? I'm Hilary Topper, and this is Hilary Topper on Air. Today, I'm speaking with Frank Buquicchio. He's the partner of the Russo Law Group, PC, Long Island's signature elder law, special needs, and estate planning law firm. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Thanks so much, Hilary. I'm so happy to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to people about this important topic.
So before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself and the Russo Law Group.
Sure. Well, the firm has been in existence for over 30 years now, and we have been Long Island's leading elder law, estate planning, and special needs firm for probably all of those years, headed by our managing partner, Vincent Russo, who literally wrote the book on elder law and special needs in New York. I've been practicing for about 25 years, pretty much exclusively in this planning area, and I've been with the firm for almost 20 years, actually 20 years October, so I'm very proud of that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So today's topic is trust, and if somebody really needs one. So there's this misconception that trusts are just for rich people. Can you talk a little bit about what a living trust is and why there is this misconception that it's only for the wealthy?
Sure, and I think that, that's kind of a historical thing, trusts being for rich people, because I think originally that was the case, that trusts were formed by people who had wealth and who were trying, frankly, to, we'll say, hide their money from the government, whether it be taxes and such, and to be able to pass those monies on to, to their future generations. That is no longer the case. Trusts can be for anybody, frankly. I always get a kick because a lot of times people will come in and they'll say, well, I want a trust, or I need a trust, and I'll ask them why. And the answers I get are kind of hysterical sometimes because people really don't even know why they need a trust. I hear things like, well, I was talking to my neighbor or my friend or at the club, and they have a trust, so I'm thinking I need a trust. Meantime, they really have no idea what it is. So a living trust is a trust that's established, obviously, during the lifetime of the person who's setting it up. And it's they call it funded. So there are assets, whether it be liquid assets or real estate, that are put into the trust during the person's lifetime. So unlike a will that doesn't necessarily take effect until somebody passes away, a living trust is a living document, and it says while the person who sets up the trust, who's called the settlor, the grantor, the trustor, there are a number of interchangeable terms, while that person is alive, it says what happens to the income in the trust, if there is any, and what happens to the principal in the trust. And depending on the type of trust, which we'll get into, would be the answers to those questions. So the settlor is the person who sets up the trust. The trustee is the person who manages the trust. The lifetime beneficiaries are the beneficiaries of the trust during the lifetime of the settlor, the person who set it up. And then similar to a will, there would be beneficiaries upon the death of the settlor so that the trust assets can be distributed.
So let's talk a little bit about revocable versus irrevocable trusts.
Great.
What exactly are they?
So revocable is a trust that can be changed or, frankly, revoked at any point by the settlor. So if I set up a revocable trust today and I change my mind tomorrow, I can completely undo it if I want and take all of my money or assets back out of the trust. An irrevocable or an irrevocable trust is a little bit more complicated in that the settlor cannot generally do that by him or herself, because that trust is set up for a different purpose. So, for example, a revocable living trust is generally done to avoid probate, but there's no asset protection. So if someone is looking to protect their assets, for example, from a long-term care situation, which is very popular in our practice, people are concerned that if, God forbid, they need to go into a nursing home in the future, that they're going to lose their house or they're going to lose their money. A revocable trust does not protect the assets. It would have to be an irrevocable trust to do that.
Huh. Interesting. So why would somebody, so that would be one of the reasons, I guess, is if somebody goes into a nursing home or assisted living that they need.
That's the most common. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And how does a revocable living trust work?
Well, basically, so the settlor, again, that's the person who set up the trust, they have the right to revoke or change or amend the trust at any time. They have the right to receive the income and or principal of the trust, and they control the trust generally as the trustee. So most typically when you set up a revocable trust, you're the person setting it up, you're the trustee, the person who's managing it, and you're the beneficiary. So in essence, it's still your money, quote unquote money. So whatever's in that revocable trust is still yours. From an income tax standpoint, any income that's generated inside this revocable trust gets reported on your return because it's still you. You use your social security number as the ID number. In essence, it's still just a different version of you.
So if you have real estate, your home in this revocable living trust, and you need to sell your home, how do you go about doing that if you have this trust set up? Is it done the same way?
Yeah, it's very simple actually, and that's a great question because that often comes up. The first thing is, can I sell my home, and then it's how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
And because you are generally the only person involved with a revocable trust, so you're the person setting it up, you're the trustee, you're the beneficiary. When you go to sell your house or your property that's inside the trust, the only real difference is you're selling the property in the name of the trust as opposed to in your name alone. So, for example, if I had a revocable trust and it was called the Frank Buquicchio Revocable Trust, when I went to sell my house that's in the name of my trust, when I go to the closing, I will sign as trustee of the Frank Buquicchio Revocable Trust as opposed to just signing my name personally. And all of the money, the checks from the sale of the house get payable to my trust, and then I put it in my bank account or investment account in the name of my trust. But it's still all my money.
So what happens in terms of taxes? Do you have to pay taxes on that real estate if you sell it?
Well, that depends on well, I guess the answer is it's no different than if you were selling it by yourself. So having property, for example, in a revocable trust does not change anything for you tax-wise. So if I was to sell my house in my own name and there was tax due because I paid $150,000 for it and now it's worth $600,000 and there's profit there and the government allows us to keep a certain amount of profit, but after the first basically $250,000 of profit, you have to pay a tax. That would be the same as if it was in the trust because it's my trust, it's my house. So from a tax standpoint, nothing changes.
Interesting. That's so interesting. All right. Well, before we move on, I just have to say that I am so appreciative of all of our sponsors and want to take this opportunity to thank them. Please support our sponsors and tell them that you heard about them on Hilary Topper on Air. Special thanks to the Russo Law Group, MedPro, Fortune Fine Jewelry, and Strain Print. So, Frank, back to you. When do you want to use a revocable living trust?
So I think probably the most common examples or indicators would be, one is if you want to avoid the delays and expense of probate. Generally speaking, in New York anyway, probate is not really a big deal. It gets kind of a bad rap, I think, because like, other things in life, it's the negative stuff, unfortunately, that's newsworthy, right? So you don't ever hear somebody say, well, when I had to probate my mom's estate, it went through great, because, that's not interesting. It's when people are fighting over the jewelry and probate takes years, those are the ones that people talk about. So, but those I would say are probably in the minority. But if you are looking to avoid probate for your family and the costs and the delays, which is fine, that's one indicator. If you own property in multiple states, which of course in New York we do have a lot of that, right? We have, especially with seniors who are, could be snowbirds, or they have property in a warmer climate where they go to maybe, in the colder months. So when you've got real estate, let's say you've got a house or a condo here in New York or on Long Island, and you've got a place down in Florida, now if you pass away owning both of those pieces of property, not only do you have to go through probate in New York, but you also have to go through probate in Florida. So it's double the attorneys, double the court, and time. And the other, probably the biggest reason that people avoid probate would be if there's a concern that somebody's going to challenge your plan or, contest your will, for example. It's much easier to contest a will than it is to contest a trust. Not that you can't contest a trust, but it makes it more difficult if somebody wanted to try to do that.
So now on the flip side, when should somebody use an irrevocable trust, and how does that actually work?
Okay, so I think there are two main reasons, and there are probably a number of sub-reasons, but the two main reasons, at least that we see with people who might be candidates for an irrevocable trust would be, one would be to save on estate taxes. That is becoming less popular because the estate tax threshold has gone up rather significantly over the last several years, so that now, a married couple in essence can pass mind-blowing, over $20 million without any real estate tax potentially. But in New York, it's a little bit less than that. So there are still people who have that kind of money, but more importantly, I think, I shouldn't say more importantly, but more common would be somebody who's looking to protect their assets, in particular their home, from a catastrophic illness. Somebody, suffering a stroke or getting into an accident or slipping and falling and ending up in a nursing home long term. And nursing homes on Long Island can run, $15,000, $16,000 plus $1,000 a month. Yeah, it's a lot of money, and people can get wiped out pretty quickly. So if they say that, Frank, I want to protect my house or I want to protect my money or both for my family in case something happens to me, then we're going to be talking about an irrevocable trust.
Interesting.
And the way it works generally in that particular situation, and we in our office call that a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. So that trust, now we still have the same three parties that we talked about before, or four parties, which is the settlor, the person who sets up the trust, the trustee, the lifetime beneficiary, and then the death beneficiaries. But in an irrevocable trust like this, the settlor cannot be, or at least should not be, I've seen it done, but we don't recommend it. The settlor should not be a trustee. So very often, for example, a client, whether married or single, let's say it's single just for purposes of discussion. So I meet with a client and she wants to protect her house from a nursing home, and we want to set up a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. So she'll set up the trust. She'll typically name one or more of her children as the trustees, and then the children would be the lifetime and death beneficiaries of the trust, except there's a provision in the trust that allows mom, in this case, to stay in the house for as long as she lives and not pay rent. And one of the beauties of it is all of her tax exemptions stay the same. So, we get that a lot. Well, if I set up this trust, am I going to lose my STAR exemption? My clients would kill me if they lost their STAR exemptions or their veterans exemptions, right? So the way the trust is structured, they still have to pay the taxes, and because of that, they still get to keep all of their tax exemptions.
Interesting. So let's go back to the beginning of this conversation when I said to you, does everyone need a trust?
And the short answer is no, not necessarily. But I think it is a case-by-case basis, right? Because the first question I ask when somebody comes in to see me, whether it's a new client or an existing client back, is, and sometimes I actually say it this way kind of jokingly, is what do you want from me? What are you trying to do, right? Because if I need to know what their goals are, because I can talk about a bunch of different things, but if it's not relevant to what they're looking to do, then why waste anybody's time? So if someone comes in and says, Frank, my main goal is to protect my house for my kids, for example, in the event I end up in a nursing home, what's the best way to do that? And I'll most likely recommend this Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. It may not be the only way, but it would be the way to do it. If somebody says, Frank, I want to avoid probate. I don't care about asset protection. I just want to avoid probate. Then we can talk about a revocable living trust. But there are other ways to avoid probate other than revocable living trusts. So it's a case-by-case basis. Are trusts for everyone? No. But can they be a tremendous planning tool? Absolutely.
Do you have any good case studies that you could share with us?
How much time do we have?
Not that much, but just
I've got bunches. Yeah. And I can give you case studies both, good side and bad side. One of the things I did not mention, and I should mention, is with this Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, is the 5-year Medicaid look back. So if somebody needs to apply for Medicaid in a nursing home, there is a 5-year look back. So if I'm meeting with somebody, for example, and they're interested in saving their home and they're in, fairly good health, that's great because we can put their home into the trust, because the catch there is they have to stay out of a nursing home for the next 5 years. And if they don't, we have an issue. So I had a client come in recently, and I call it age-appropriate health, right? Because age is just a factor. I've had, unfortunately, clients who are in their 40s and 50s diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and dementia, and I had a client who was 90, I'll never forget her, 91 years old and still riding a motorcycle. So yeah, so you can't just say, well, your age, I'm 70 years old. Should I do a trust? I don't know. I need more information.
Right.
So I call it age appropriate health. So are you for a 70-year-old? Do you have age? Obviously, as we get older, things tend to break down. But if you're a 70-year-old in normal health, I'll call it, then that's probably the sweet spot in terms of doing this kind of planning, because chances of you getting through the next 5 years without needing a nursing home are probably pretty good.
Right. Awesome. This was great.
Thanks.
Great information. So finally, how could people get in touch with you and learn more about the Russo Law Group?
Well, a number of ways. We have an excellent website, which is V as in Vincent, J as in Joseph, vjrussolaw.com. There's a lot of information there, including information on the attorneys. There are blogs, all kinds of newsletters and things like that. Certainly, we'd love it for people to call us. We have an 800 number that people can call, which is 800-680-1717. And we have great intake people who get some kind of basic initial information. And then if they need to get one of the attorneys on the phone to answer a couple of questions, we're happy to do that. And then hopefully we meet with them and get their goals accomplished.
So I'm talking with Frank Buquicchio, who is a partner at the Russo Law Group on Long Island. Thank you so much, Frank, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I also want to thank our sponsors, the Russo Law Group, MetPro, Fortunoff Fine Jewelry, and Strain Print. And last but not least, I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. If you want more information on this show or any other show, visit our website at hilarytopperonair.com, or you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, you name it, we're out there. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.